My wife. Hello, and my wife. All right, welcome to another episode of Woodward Tigers here at woodwardsports.com. I'm Rogelio Castillo. Alongside me is Chris Brown, Hubert, and John. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And by the way, I take responsibility. The special last week with Trevor and John, that is in audio form, will be out as a bonus episode this week. I've been a little under the weather because I decided this is the time of year where you go to Christmas parties. And it's not that I'm a germaphobe or anything. Whatever. But you take that risk when you're out with groups of people all the time. And I started a new position this week. So it was one of two back-to-back Christmas parties I went to. And yesterday I've been starting to feel a little ill, and today it's just kind of spread over. So going to the Woodward Studios, I've been wiping myself down as much as possible. I'm always doing that anyways. I'm always for my, I always wash my hands, and I mean, it's normal common sense stuff, but you'd be surprised when people don't wash their hands and are not.
We just appreciate you being in the trainer's room all day and you're answering the bell tonight.
Yeah. So that's what I did. The last couple hours I've been drinking hot tea, and my dog's been cuddling with me. So she did not want me to get up off the couch, but nevertheless, so a lot to get to this evening as the Tigers signed another pitcher. They made the Matt Boyd deal official. We had Kerry Carpenter and Wilmer Flores being the minor league players of the year. There's a signing. The Carlos Rodriguez went to the Yankees. There was another signing with Adam Frazier going to Baltimore. We'll talk all about that. There's a lot of free agent activity. So first and foremost, I want to thank everybody on YouTube who's been participating with us in the last few weeks. Thanks everybody for this time of year. We're eternally grateful, and you make the chats very good. So appreciate that. But yeah, so yesterday the Tigers went out, and it was funny because the day before, our friend of the show, John Verberg on Twitter, thought it'd be a good idea if the Tigers go after Michael Lorenzen, who has been with the Angels, most recently with the Angels, has been kind of better as a reliever than a starter. And what do you know? Tigers signed into a 1-year deal worth $8.5 million. And of course, it was so the funny thing is, one place says the source was Mark Fine said, another one said was Robert Murray. So for the sake of argument, I'm going to go with Mark Fine said because, yeah.
Fair enough. It came as a bit of a surprise. It probably shouldn't have. He was kind of the tier of pitcher we expected them to add if they were going to add another arm. But it's a fairly fun deal. Lorenzen is a really interesting dude. I was sharing some videos last night. There are lots of videos of him on YouTube, lifting weights, doing his crazy workout regimen. He's basically the most fit player in Major League Baseball. But yeah, so he's been a reliever for most of his pro career. The Reds brought him up as a starter and then let him start in 2015, I think it was his rookie year, and then moved him to the bullpen. And he was really one of the more dependable relievers in all of baseball. I think when I looked it up, he had the third most innings out of any reliever from 2017 to 2019. But he wanted to start, and so the Angels gave him that chance last year, and for the most part, it worked out okay. He just, he came down with shoulder trouble for the second year in a row, and I think that's the only real red flag here is that maybe he just isn't built to be a starter. But there's that upside there that he could give you 150 innings or whatever, and it's a pretty high floor because we know that he's likely to be a decent reliever if he has to take that role. So yeah, it made a lot of sense. Gives the Tigers more pitching depth and allows them to do some other things. So yeah, I don't see many complaints about this move.
Oh, Uper, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I have long-standing hard and fast rule. You're never going to hear me complain much about a 1-year contract. So in that respect, it's ideal. I am always a little circumspect about shoulders, but again, it's a 1-year deal. So if his shoulder blows up, okay, that's part of doing business. But he's been a relatively effective pitcher for a long time. And as they traded Joe Jimenez, they're going to need somebody in their bullpen who can take those innings. And no reason why Lorenzen couldn't, unless he's in the rotation. So, and if he ends up making 25 starts, then that's a pretty good signing too. So, Yeah, they can do more of that.
What about you, John?
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy I really didn't hear much about this offseason. He was kind of like an under the radar type of guy, but I think I know some people are upset because they don't think the Tigers need more pitching, but I don't think you can ever have enough pitching. And who's to say they don't trade another, starting pitcher or reliever, which we'll get into later in the show. Uh, but yeah, I mean, he made 18 starts last year. He was decent. ERA was a little bit over 4. And if he basically replicates what he did last season, 100 innings pitched, I mean, he was a serviceable pitcher. And at the very least, maybe he's a guy you look to move out the trade deadline if he has a good first half. So, again, I don't see how you can have any complaints about this.
I think that, and Troy brings up a good point too, that one of the things I will say that I do find concerning right now is the fact that they haven't added another bat. Now, again, the 40-man roster is set, as Chris mentioned to me earlier in the text, that at some point you're going to have to figure out what they're going to do, because if you look at the offense, again, there's a couple of ways to look at the offense last year. It was the same hitting coach, same instructors as the year before, and they were historically bad. So what happened? Was it the various baseballs that were out there? Why did this team regress so bad on offense that it was historically bad? And there's not a lot of clear-cut answers on that right now. But to Troy's point, I do agree. I mean, right now the free agent market is essentially filling up. You saw Carlos Rodon sign earlier. You have Dansby Swanson, who, let's face it, folks, he's not coming to Detroit. Not trying to be a dick about it, but facts are facts. You have, in terms of even hitters out there, you still have Brandon Drury out there, which is interesting. Andrew Benintendi, who's an outfielder I like, but I was telling Chris earlier, I think the Tigers have their outfield set, because I think that you look at what they're going to do with Badu. I could be wrong, but I think with the way they have their outfield set right now with the set of veterans and young guys, I think they had enough there with Carpenter too. But a guy who I really think that the Tigers, I'm surprised not signed yet, is Profar, who's played all over a little bit. But yeah, another guy, Brian Anderson's been mentioned too. It was a third baseman, like a 1-year deal. Who's still out there, surprisingly enough, was Gary Sanchez, who, we saw Omar Navarre get signed by the Mets, but I'm surprised Sanchez. Well, I'm not really surprised because defensively he's a liability, but still, either way, regardless, I think that I would like for the Tigers to, at least, you would think, based off what they have, and trading a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez could bring you something back. But again, it depends on what the Tigers are going to do. The Tigers are not going to compete next year. They've made it clear, they're not going to contend next year because they don't have the pieces for it. But I look at the rest of the names in this market here, and it's like there's nothing. Again, I like the idea of Will Myers, but again, he's also been struggling with some injuries.
I think what we're saying is, in answer to some of the comments, signing Michael Lorenzen and Matthew Boyd to 1-year deals isn't what's precluding them from signing hitters, right? They're not signing these pitchers at the expense of signing someone for the lineup. They just haven't done it. But again, we're not to Christmas yet. So you got to believe they will fill out a couple spots. I was looking at Gene Segura as someone who, a little bit of speed, a little bit of power, not a whole lot of either, but someone who could play second base for them and be okay. I'm interested in Drury, multi-position guy, almost slugged 30 homers last year. Why hasn't the market moved quicker for him? I'm just wondering if, the slightly lower OBP and the fact that it was a career year and nobody thinks he can do it again. I just wonder if that's what's the mindset out there.
Yeah, a guy I really was interested to was Adam Frazier. He signed 1-year deal with the Orioles today, which, 1 year, $8 million. I think that would have been a really nice fit for the Tigers, just because you could have platooned him with Jonathan Scope at second base. But yeah, like you guys said, there's still options out there. I'm gonna third that on Drury. I think he'd be perfect. He could play third. He could play second. He could be that right-handed outfield bat that you need. And, there's still some veterans out there like Justin Turner and Longoria. So I do think they will sign a free agent hitter, but I think, for now, I think they're in a good spot.
Yeah, with Drury, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's basically, I think teams are skeptical that he can reproduce what he did last year. And from Brewery's standpoint, this was his best year. He's probably never going to get another free agent contract. So I'm sure he's pushing for like a 3 to 4 year deal. And I'm sure teams do not want to do that. He may ultimately end up signing with a team like the Mets, who just goes absolutely hog wild. It's like, all right, sure. What's another $30 million over 3 years or something like that? But yeah, I mean, I think just based on the way the offseason has played out so far, I think teams are kind of waiting out that second and third tier of hitters for the most part. The top names have mostly signed, but it's been more of a pitching free for all, it seems like. So maybe they're just waiting for these bats to come down in price a little bit. I think, the general feeling I get, and a lot of other people seem to share this, is that the Tigers are kind of building up their pitching depth to then potentially move some of the younger arms to get more bats along the lines of Justin Henry Malloy, like players who fit their profile better than what they currently have in the system or that are currently available. And we'll see. I don't think they're done making moves this offseason by any means, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure they're going to go out and sign a big free agent bat. Certainly, they're not a big free agent bat. There aren't any left, but a decent one.
I mean, go ahead, Uber.
I was wondering. Correct me if I'm wrong. If he signed somewhere and I missed it, then I apologize. But what could they do with a guy like Trey Mancini? I mean, could they? I mean, they need power. I mean, let's face it. I mean, he could provide a little, but where do you play him?
I mean, do you put him? That's a good question. I mean, do you put him at? He was playing right field, right, in first base at times too.
Yeah,
I think he was mostly first base, wasn't
he? Yeah, I mean, you could use him as a backup to Torque because if Torkelson gets off to a bad start again, you have your option right there with that. So I totally can see that. And defensively, he's not a liability. So, but I look at Chris, you bring up the idea of trading a young pitcher. And the Tigers, if you look at what they have down in terms of AAA prospect wise, I mean, you have right now in your roster, you have Alex Fado, who we don't know he's gonna come back, but then you have Reese Olson, you got Garrett Hill, and then you have Ronnie Garcia. And Garcia's in this funky kind of situation in a sense because he's often injured, but was effective. He's been very, very effective when he's healthy. So he's still on the 40-man. So what are you going to do with him and the likes of Hill? Could be the long man out of the bullpen. I still think Hill's better suited out of the bullpen. But honestly, if you look at some even so you have Wilmer Flores, who's right there. You have Austin Berger, who, again, velocity aside, was pretty good last year. But he could be valued somewhere else by another team. I mean, to me, he's definitely the definition of a 4th or 5th starter, possibly bullpen. I don't see the longevity in terms of a guy who's going to give you 150, 160 innings a year, which is strange to think that. But I mean, we look at the two free agents assigned in Boyd and Lorenzen. The Tigers, I had to look this up because I was just curious. I'm like, so what does a free agent they've signed since 2016? And the fact is that they haven't had a starter in their first year with the team go over 100 at least. I mean, Jose Arena pitched 100 innings, but he didn't have exactly 100 innings, but only had 19 starts. So it's almost like pick your poison. I mean, I know I get back to what you guys were saying about signing the two pitchers. Right? Why not? Because Ivan Nova, 5 starts. I mean, the fact that Nova, Moore, Ross, all those guys just pitched.
Tehran.
Yeah, Tehran. Yeah. Tehran pitched combined less than 70 innings combined. So I don't blame the Tigers for going after the extra pitcher. But Chris, to what your point, getting back to what you're saying about the trade thing, the trade idea, I would not surprise me at all because it makes sense. They look at the free agent market. I mean, do you want Brian Anderson or do you want somebody that we don't know about that's ready to go that could be under club control longer?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple things. Like what's that?
The Tigers need a Santa for Christmas party. They could get Al Avila cheap. Oh man.
Sorry.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah.
But we mentioned a lot of the free agent arms they took before ended up getting hurt, and I've kind of wondered how much of the Tigers completely, Scott Harris completely refashioning the medical staff has something to do with that. Like, what was the staff before just really bad at identifying players who were hurt? Remember nobody found Casey Mize's torn elbow ligament until he went to a specialist, right? Like, you'd kind of hope that the team could find stuff like that. And so you got
debated.
Well, no, I mean, but
yeah.
He's been hurt.
Yeah.
Mize was hurt all throughout high school and college, but nobody, like, maybe they didn't didn't admit they found the torn elbow ligament. It wasn't even torn, was it? It was just all like old pair of stockings. It was just all blown out.
Yeah.
But in any event, I think that to a certain extent, we're at a point in baseball now where you can just grow pitchers. Like, you can't grow aces, but I don't think the Tigers really have any. As much as I like Skubal and Mize showed promise, and people like Manning and all that stuff, I don't think any of those guys is really going to be a pure ace down the road. And so you could trade those guys. They're under team control. They're most of them are hurt right now, but that could provide you a decent return in terms of bats that they might not be able to get elsewhere. And that, I think, might ultimately be where they go, where they feel like they can stitch together a solid pitching staff from these 1-year free agent deals and some other prospects that they come up and develop, just because how advanced pitching development is now. So I think that they're just basically, going to deal from their strength, which is pitching right now. But we'll see. Maybe this is it for their pitching signings, and they're going to go sign 3 or 4 bats down the road. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about trading Mize, Manning, or Skubal, just because I feel like all 3 of their trade value just isn't very high right now. So I don't know how that would work if you're trading them all kind of at a low point in their value, and they're all still so young and have so many years left of control. So I personally don't really want to see that happen, but I get.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get that. That's definitely true, and you'd want those guys to come back and show that they're legit. And there's no reason to trade them right now. It's just they would provide some value. But the one thing I always counter with is like, how do we know that this is the lowest their trade value is going to be? Like,
right.
Like, people, like, if you look at Spencer Torkelson right now, is this the lowest his value is ever going to be, or is it the highest his value is ever going to be? What if it doesn't work out again next year? So you really have to trust your own evaluations and your own medical opinions and things like that. And that's kind of what we hope that Scott Harris and company can do. And I don't think he's going to be attached to any of these former top prospects that were supposed to be part of this rebuild. So if he gets a good trade offer, or if he spots a guy he wants, it wouldn't shock me if they move one of those guys.
So in terms of what Harrison Garrett brings up to you about bias doesn't fit the control of strike zone narrative. In terms of, I know last year the reason I was struggling to throw balls to first is because he had an injured thumb majority of the season. I think until July, but even then, after that, he still struggled. But I believe, until the beginning of July, he was dealing with the thumb. And if you notice, his numbers on the hitting side got better. So somebody suggested in the chat and the Vol, but the reason why, in terms of like his XBA is actually not that, like, for his career wise, has been 227. So he did 227 the year he had 38 home runs in 2021, big year for him, and then back to a 209. So he's had 201, 227 in his career. Last year he just hit 12 home runs. Now that would probably make him among the leaders in the Tigers, granted, but it also doesn't fit that narrative because he also strikes out about 30% of the time. So I don't think, but then again, you look at his spray chart, a lot of his hits, a lot of his doubles and home runs are all at the left field. So that's something that would fit well, again, with the right-handedness the Tigers definitely need. But as far as the outfield, I don't know. If the Tigers were to get somebody on outfielder, I would want them to get an outfielder that's impactful, like a 3-WAR or something like that to that extent. Because if they're going to trade their young pitching, the trade-off should be a guy who's going to give you 20 or 30 home runs. And I don't know if Duvall can. He has the capability to do it, but I don't know if he at 34 years old.
Yeah, I know Benintendi was a guy. I know you're a big fan of, Raj.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it, but do they really need another left-handed bat in the outfield? Like,
Yeah.
If they do that, like Badu's probably starting the season in the minors next year if they do sign Benintendi.
Yeah, it's true. We don't know how they feel about Badu. Go ahead, Chris. What were you gonna say?
Oh, just both Drury and Duvall would be kind of ideal right-handed hitters in a platoon situation. They absolutely crush left-handed pitching. The problem is, I mean, Duvall, that's more a realistic option. Drury, I don't think is going to want that role because it's a pretty small role. You're talking about the small side of a platoon, the short side of a platoon. You're getting 200, 250 at bats a year if that's how you're used. But yeah, you could piece together with Duvall. I think you could piece together a decent corner outfield bat with him and Kerry Carpenter or him and Badu. But yeah, Benintendi, I haven't looked, but I think he's probably pretty decent against left-handed pitching. He's just kind of an average across the board guy, which, the Tigers need more players like that. I just don't know if that would become a priority for them at this point in the offseason. I feel like rather than getting an average player, they probably just want to let some of the younger guys play to see if they can become that on their own.
Right.
Unless they already have the evaluations and say, no, these guys aren't it, which is entirely possible, but we'll see.
As far as Benintendi goes for lefties, he hit 274 against lefties with the Yankees, with the Royals. Then when he went to the Yankees, it was 250. So for his career, that was this season. I'm trying to find his career.
Not bad though.
No.
Yeah.
Career, he's a 260 hitter against lefties, 286 against righties. Let's check the 92 WRC plus against lefties, 116 against righties. So yeah, there's a platoon split there, but it's not egregious. That's a guy you can play every day.
Aaron Craig brings up a good question in the chat. If the Tigers move Gregory Soto this offseason, is the next closer already on the 4-man roster? Red and white. I'm gonna just look. Here's the thing. Like the reason why, Chris, we noticed, and you, all of us, I think that it was something telling that Harris was talking about a slider and was talking about it at one of the press conferences recently. So there's something to be said about the way you review a player. This is a player that, keep in mind, he just came here, so he's got his valuation. And if Brandon White's already striking a chord with him already, you can you can put Alex Lang as a closer. There's numerous possibilities you could do with that if they decide to trade Soto. But yeah, Brandon White would be maybe a candidate in case Lang can't do it, or even somebody like the lines of, even, I know this sounds like people might laugh at me when I say this, but I don't care. Will
Vest?
Yeah, Will Vest. See my vest.
No, I mean, I think, you have to have a closer. So the closer is on the roster if Soto's gone. I would think that they would probably end up being Lang, just because he's kind of the most analogous pitcher to Gregory Soto in terms of he's a guy that strikes out. He strikes out a lot more people than Soto did last year, but he's also pretty wild. So you don't necessarily want him, pitching in the middle of a game where it could matter more, or pitching, an inning plus. But yeah, I mean, I think they would go through Lang, they go through Cisnero, they go through Vest, and whoever, go hold of the job. That isn't to say that a closer is going to be as good as Soto has been, but at least in terms of locking down actual save opportunities, which is something that Raj has pointed out multiple times, that Soto was, I think, well over 90% or slightly over 90% last year, which is among the best in Tigers history.
Yeah, 93 back-to-back, 93% this year, 95 the year before, something to that effect.
Yeah, he's not built for extra inning games in modern baseball with a man already on second. That's not his jam.
No.
Yeah. So I did want to go really quick because we updated. So if you're watching us, we also, Chris and I, and we had a couple of other people that commented on our top 25 over at TigerMineReport.com. So TigersMLReport.com, and what segues into today with Kerry Carpenter being the Tiger Minor League Player of the Year and Wilmer Flores being the Tiger Pitcher of the Year, the minors. So here's our new top 25. So Colt Keith, I'm just scrolling through. I'm not going to go name them. So if you go to TigerMineReport.com, TigersMLReport.com rather, it's on the top tab right there. And yeah, so the big change was just Henry Malloy going to number 5, moved Ty Madden down number 6, and we put Mason Englert at number 16. And somebody mentioned, by the way, that we should put the A and AAA right here where the teams are. So I'll definitely make a change for that for sure. So, but yeah, this is our new top 25. So go to TigersMLReport.com, and there's profiles we're doing. The profiles are like, I want to show people the profiles. So I just, because the reason why is they've been a kind of a labor of love, but they've also been taking forever because I'm currently working 2 full-time jobs at the moment. But and one of the things that the reason why I wanted to show people the profile. So if people haven't seen or what her profile looks like, let's see here. So this is the one I did for Josh Crouch way back when. So all this animation plus the graphics and all that and doing the reports. So we have all the notes. We have all the information. It is stored away from all the games we went to this year. We just have to put it out. That's all it is. And so anyway, but yeah, these are what some of the profile looks like. So, but yeah, I just
do you know off the top of your head who the 2 who fell off the list are?
Yes. It was
I think let's see.
Oh wait,
Manuel Sequeira and Kader Montero.
Okay.
I thought Montero was like number 26 or 27, wasn't he?
So right now, it looks to me like we have Elvis Alvarado 25, Sequeira 26, Montero 27, and Brendan Davis 28.
All right. So wait a minute. Hold on. Let me see. You know what? I forgot we have the list here. So the original 1.0 list.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. You were right. Okay, you were absolutely right. My bad.
Yeah, I mean, this was not this was not a complete reconfiguring of the list. We just took the 2 new guys and threw them in there where we thought they belonged. And and we also we called for a mail questions for the minor league report last week, and we got some good ones. And so I ended up we wrote up a mailbag. It's at 1,600 words right now, so we may split it into 2. But some good questions in there about about who which kind of players we expect to maybe outperform expectations this year, or if there's going to be another out of nowhere Kerry Carpenter thing. And so hopefully people check that out when we write it, because there's a bunch of stuff that I would like to say on this podcast, but I've already written it. So I'd rather they just go read it and then we can talk about it later.
And yeah, I'll be adding my my takes on that in terms of Adam Wolf real quick, because I've wrote about Adam Wolf on the minor league site a couple times because the changes he made to his windup in terms of being a better pitcher. Last month and a half of the season in Erie, he was like one of Erie's best pitchers out of the bullpen. He was very consistent, not allow a run for about a month. And so I think that one of the best things getting to know, and we got to know Adam Wolf a little bit too, because he was always, when we were down in the behind home plate, he was always kind of tracking pitchers, and also pretty much he took my stuff down when I had a gallbladder attack last year. So props to Adam Wolf for that incident. So
yeah, no, that was he seemed like a good dude. He helped us. We were sitting there while he was charting pitches once too, and he was a good dude to talk to. Was joking about reading some of our tweets and some of our buddy Keenan's tweets too.
Yeah, he originally got us mixed up with something else, and then we're like, no, we're not them.
Yeah.
So, but but it was cool. Anyway, yeah, Adam Wolf. There's a possibility that I could see him maybe getting some time, maybe late in the year, if he continues to progress like that. So,
along those lines, we had a question about Jake Higginbotham in the mailbag, and there are a large number of kind of left-handed relievers who with a nice run at AAA might find themselves called up to the majors at some point. They're kind of up and down guys, and I would consider Wolf in that group, along with, we talked about Del Pozo. I think he's still around. Gunter, or Gunther, I think his name is, but I just like to call him Gunter. We were joking last night, Raj and I, that the Tigers just this offseason wanted to add one player who sounds like he's from a different European country. So you got Higginbotham sounds like he's British, and Gunter sounds like he's German, and you got Peperski, who's Polish, and so anyway.
Yeah. So so got the chance to talk to Kerry Carpenter today. He was the Tigers made him available. This is, by the way, Jake. He'll go about him in case you haven't seen him pitch. So thanks, Chris, for clipping this together. And you can please subscribe to our minor league channel, the Tiger Minor League Report. We have a lot of video. There's no reason why this channel is not over 1,000. It should be at 1,000. So if you're a subscriber to this channel, by all means, just take a minute, go over there, subscribe. And we got all the new stuff. All the new guys are in here right now. Yeah. So again, apologies for being under the weather. So if I sound a little nasally, I apologize. But Kerry Carpenter spoke today about the moment it clicked for him in Erie, and just reiterating how much of he's a good guy he is. And Jason Beck asked him about taking the number 48, and he said, "Look, if that boy wants it back, I'm not going to put up a fight for it." So it was good to hear from him, and really kind of his journey from the beginning of the year when he was talking about the first series in May against Akron, where he said, "Look, I started getting ahead, starting at 95-mile-an-hour plus, and when I was holding up on off speed and just the changes he made, and just like where is he going to fit in this lineup next year? We shall see." But as far as Flores goes, one of the questions too was about his fatigue, and we saw him last year in Erie in those playoff series where he fought back and just was able to maintain his velocity a little bit. But I don't know. I'll start with you, Uper. In terms of Wilmer Flores next year, we already know Kerry Carpenter is going to be around, but is Flores one of those guys you could see as a 6 or 7 starter coming up to the Tigers at some point?
Oh, well, obviously, if they have anything close to the year they had last year, then yes, he'll probably be up the third week of the season because everybody was dropping like flies. But let's just assume normal-ish health for the major league club. If he gets off to any kind of start, even if it's 90% of what he was last year, you got to believe they're going to want to get a look at him and get him to the major leagues, because I'm starting to believe more and more. We all know pitchers break, and having him keep wasting bullets in the minor leagues and innings in the minor leagues, if he's ready, he should be in the majors. And I think they're at the point of building this team where they don't need to let kids in the minors any longer than they need to be there. So I'm hopeful we see him by Memorial Day.
And I know one of the things that Chris and I talked about was his lack of doesn't need a change up. So that was one of the things that developing that pitch, because he has those 2 different sliders. He has that one that's kind of a short break, kind of looks like a cutter, and there's one with a sweeping action. And so I don't know, it paired up with a changeup and a fastball too that he has. Yeah, a changeup to his repertoire. I mean, that's a pretty good combo. John, what about? I mean, in terms of Wilmer Flores, I know he's new to you, but do you see him coming up at all at some point by the summer?
Well, I think that could depend on if any more starters are moved, like Chris was talking about. I would honestly say hopefully not, because I do think this team has good enough depth. So you just hope injury-wise they don't need him.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to see him out of the bullpen. But I would say hopefully we don't see him until like September. I mean, personally.
Well, I mean, Chris, and again, we talked about we've gone back and forth about the idea of him going in the bullpen. There's been even with Trevor Huth from Bless You Boys, where he's dead sure that Reese Olson is going to be a starter, whereas we say, it might be a little reliever risk.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think we are likely to see the carousel of starters in the 40-man roster get run through before we see Flores next year. So that includes, you mentioned like Ronnie Garcia, we could see him start a game. They added Reese Olson to the 40-man, so he'll probably get a start before Flores. But I would think Flores and Bergner are the next 2 who aren't on the 40-man who would be called up to start. And who knows? I mean, maybe Garrett Hill will get a start too. So I think that he's probably 4 or 5 starters away. But I think he's the most talented of all those guys. And the one thing we should point out, though, is now that they've added Boyd and Lorenzen, if they don't trade anybody, you've got a pretty full major league rotation at this point, right? You've got Eduardo Rodriguez, you've got Lorenzen, you've got Boyd, you've got Spencer Turnbull theoretically, and you've got Matt Manning, right? So you're pushing possibly Joey Wentz, Alex Faedo back to AAA. So those guys would then step in line. So yeah, without a trade, it would take another 2022 level disaster event to get Flores up to the big leagues. But again, like I was saying, he's probably more talented than all those guys.
Well,
His talent level is similar to Wentz and Faedo, I would say.
You guys have seen him more. Is he talented enough to force their hand? I mean, could he have enough of a start through, let's say, 60 innings where they say, we got to get him up?
I think if he starts the way he did in Erie, then yes, because the biggest test for him was, I mean, he made short work of high A. I mean, he breezed through high A. And then keep in mind, too, this is, 19 innings in high A against really good competition, because this is when early on in the year before high A guys went over to double A. Then he goes to double A, where he's taking on, again, guys that are 5 or 6 years older than him. And after adjustment, he was doing really well, especially down the stretch in August and September, where Erie wasn't getting the consistent starts from Olsen they were getting before. I mean, you had Chase Kirby being the MVP there for the Seawolves towards the end of the season, and Flores is right there with him. I thought that Flores did a very good job of not showing that fatigue he showed in Lakeland the year before. And I think that he might force their hand if he gets off to the same start. The only thing that I'm concerned with is, again, we've talked about the soft body kind of thing. Like is he going to get leaner? Is he going to continue to grow? Whatever the case may be. But outside of that, it's to see the Tigers hit on somebody like this and to have a prospect with that kind of arm. It goes to show, again, whether it's Avila, whether it's the scout, that in the last few years, the Tigers have found at least some sort of hidden gems, if you will. I mean, again, we couldn't say that before.
I mean, to me, Flores, we kind of, I mean, he was just named the Tigers pitcher of the year, but we kind of don't lump him into the category of the guys who made amazing leaps last year. We talk about Parker Meadows and we talk about Kerry Carpenter and Winslow Perez. Wilmer Flores showed some signs in 2021, but he was, in low A, and they sent him to the AFL and he got rocked. But this is a dude where we were concerned about reliever risk because it's kind of there's a little bit of violence in the delivery, and like Raj said, it's not the best body. But usually you're worried about that because it affects command and control. And this is a kid who is 21 in Double A with fewer than 100 innings pitched in his entire career, including college, who put up 10.2 strikeouts per 9 and 2.3 walks per 9 in Double A with a 3 ERA. He's composed, he has good stuff, and he throws strikes. And so I can absolutely see him forcing the Tigers' hand. The one thing we talk about is he doesn't really have a changeup. He talked about working on it. He didn't appear to need one in Double A because his cutter or slider or whatever was pretty good pitch to neutralize left-handed hitters. Will he need that against more advanced hitters? That I can't say. He may need another weapon against AAA and Major League left-handed hitters. But yeah, I mean, I think that he's a guy who has the arm talent and the ability to come up and pitch well in the majors next year.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that stood out to me last year, and it was something that was mentioned on the call today, that he had a guy who also doesn't speak a lot of English. And he was working on his English. He was there was a couple times where he would say, "I'll do the interview in English," but if it was guys like Luis, veteran infielder they had from the Mets, Carpio, Carpenter mentioned today, guys like that were helping Flores feel more comfortable. So that was good. I mean, you think about this too. I mean, he was in Lakeland where there's a lot of Hispanic players there and probably within his element. And so going to West Michigan for a hot second, then going to Erie, that's all that within a year. It's a lot of changes, and be able to go in there I keep talking about this, but that playoff start against Somerset was one of those things that will forever stick in my brain because the ability to come back against a team, and we saw this when he went down to Somerset. He was the only pitcher that was able to handle Somerset. I mean, whether the Patriots or not were tipping pitches or whatever the case was, from what allegedly, if you will, down in Somerset, Flores was the only one that was able to maintain or control the Patriots' bats, and the Somerset had some really good talent too.
Yeah, and I go back. I mean, you mentioned he was there. He was in West Michigan for a hot minute. Like that was the next step for him, and he struck out 35 guys in 19 innings. So they're like, okay, this is not gonna. Yeah, and I remember we went to Lansing to get a good look. Like this was before you got promoted, and I wanted to get a look at Dylan Smith and Ty Madden and Wilmer Flores, and we were sitting around the scouts behind home plate, and the scouts I remember Wilmer, for one of the other starts, Wilmer Flores sat down to chart pitches, and the scouts were looking at each other like, "That's the dude. That's the guy we need to see. These other guys are fine. This is the dude we need to see."
And then he has his first start in high A.
He did. He sure did. He didn't even get out of the first inning. But that was, and part of that is so that's another thing that we need to see from him is that he made 19 starts at AA, but only threw like 89 innings, right? Because the Tigers were very cautious about having him throw a lot of innings, especially early in the season. Part of that was just building him up, but part of it was to save him so he could keep making regular starts at the end of the year, and it eventually paid off. Where I think he threw 4 innings against Somerset in the playoffs. So there is that next step of just getting more innings on his arm, and that's what he talked about was conditioning, I think. But yeah, I mean, he certainly has the frame to be an innings eater, and just a matter of doing it.
So, in terms of the other, let's move on to in terms of how confident that makes me more confident about the pitching staff. But the other question that John brought up was, should Tiger fans be upset at Scott Harris because lack of bats and lack of offense that's being had here? So, John, since you phrased the question well, I'll let you start. I mean, do you think the Tigers fans should be mad at Scott Harris?
No, I don't think so, but I know they're going to be regardless. But I like what you said, Chris, about how they're going to sign these pitchers to 1 or 2 year deals and then kind of trade their younger pitchers for bats, kind of like what they did with Joe Jimenez. I really kind of like that because I think pitchers, like you can develop pitchers and you can find these pitchers and develop them into aces and front of line rotation starters. And so no, I think we have to remember how young this offseason really is. Like I was thinking back, you guys remember like a couple years ago how like the top free agents, they weren't signing until like February or March. Like, and I think it's good to see now that all the top free agents are off the board pretty much, and it's not even Christmas yet, which I think is a good thing for the game. And like the secondary bats in the free agent market haven't really gone yet, and maybe the Tigers will look at some of those guys, or maybe they won't. But I think they've built up enough pitching depth to where they have some arms that they could move if they choose to get some young bats in here, like a Henry Malloy, who can excite Tigers fans heading into the future. So I know people are upset. I would just say just give it another month, and I think people will be a lot more optimistic heading into next year.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if this is the final roster, that Tigers fans have every right to be upset with Scott Harris not getting more bats. But I think there's a long way to go, and just based on their MO that we've kind of sussed out so far, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if in another month and a half or 2 months we start seeing them maybe pivot to some bats who are still available. Like maybe Michael Conforto is still out there, and I know he's a left-handed hitting outfielder, and they don't need that, but eventually that's a guy you go, you know what, we'll give him a 1 year get right deal with a player option or whatever that he'll turn down, and let him go out there and hit for us, and maybe he has a great year and you could trade him, or maybe it doesn't work out, but something like that where they're gonna, I think, just sign guys when they think the value is right, and maybe they just don't think that's the case right now.
What about you, Uper?
Well, certainly you can't, there's no evidence to be upset with at Scott Harris. I mean, it's his first off season. He was left a pretty bare cupboard. the fact that they've made two kind of low key signings, not the end of the world. They have chosen.
Oh, really?
Hello?
No. I'm
Sorry, yeah.
listening.
Oh.
We didn't know that Folio re-signed with the Mets, apparently.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that either. You know, I'm sorry, where was I? They've chosen not to sign any of the big ticket free agents, right? Now, some of that may have been chosen for them because those guys didn't want to come to Detroit.
Right.
They can't do much about that. But seemingly, to all our evidence that we know of, they didn't even compete for any of them. Okay? So that's a choice. They did not compete for a prime free agent. Now, I'm always of the belief you should go for prime talent all the time. If you truly intend on winning being a winning organization, you have to have the premium talent. They have passed competing for that this offseason. Their excuse is going to be that Al Avila's organization was so far from competing that now is not the time, which is a phrase I always detest. There's never a bad time to get a good player. But again, is it Chris Ilitch or is it Scott Harris? You know, Chris Ilitch is going to sign off on any large, $100 million plus deal. And if he doesn't want to do it, then they're probably not going to do it. So I always look beyond the GM and wondering what the owner's motivations are.
Well, yeah, I mean, that Chris Ilitch is the big question mark here, right? Like, I think what we learned, at least what I gathered, was that from the Avila rebuild, is that Ilitch wants to have a leaner payroll in a player development focused organization where they bring guys up from within and eventually sign, medium tier to a medium upper tier free agents like a Javi Baez or whatever to supplement the roster. And basically, Al Avila couldn't do that for him. He couldn't build that player development machine. So I think he wants Scott Harris to do that now. I think and we don't want to talk about it being another rebuild, but I think it's basically Scott Harris having to try to fix the Avila mess. Like you said, that's going to be their excuse. So I put the lack of signings on Ilitch. I think that the payroll is probably not to the point, or I don't think Harris has enough money to work with to kind of swim with the big fishes here. But we'll see in another year or two. I don't know. Maybe after the contracts come off the books next year, the Tigers are all in on Manny Machado or something like that, or Rafael Devers. But it'll take some time. But I was looking. I didn't see. It didn't look like Conforto signed somewhere. I don't.
Yeah, I don't recall hearing that at all.
Yeah.
So,
I just I'm always going to hold Chris Ilitch to that quote, and I think it was around 2019, whatever it was, doesn't matter when, that I have the fire inside to compete. It's burning in his belly to put a winner on the field. Okay.
Yeah.
He's not showing that. I'm sorry. You got to, if you're going to say that, if you're going to put that in public, Mr. Ilitch, we got to see it. Okay. Right now, that burning in his stomach is just some bad Taco Bell. Okay. He ain't looking to win. All right. So, at some point, obviously it's not going to be the winter of 2022. We've got to see that fire to compete.
What do you say? Are you like upset because they didn't sign like Correa or like
why not?
Down?
We've heard, for instance, the Minnesota Twins, who didn't finish that far ahead of the Tigers last year, supposedly made a large offer for Correa. And then if you want to listen to John Heyman, which I know is a sketchy situation, but, he said they were pivoting from Correa to Dansby Swanson. Well, whether it's true or not, evidently the Twins are competing for these guys. And they ended up with Carlos Correa last year, by the way. They waited out the market and got it. If the Minnesota Twins can do it, I guarantee you the Pohlads aren't a whole lot richer than the Ilitches. Okay, they're not. So, again, you can either choose to compete or you can choose to sit on the sideline. And we see what the choices being made are.
Yeah, in terms, look, I think I brought up there was a great article on Fangraphs about why teams are signing extremely long contracts because of inflation, and it might cost them cheaper down the road. And then there's all the collective bargaining language behind it. But at the same time, I know with Cabrera's contract coming off the books next year, to me, that's going to be the tell right there. If the Tigers don't spend next year with all that money coming off, at least to a mid-level free agent, then you have to kind of go, well, they're going to do the Cleveland Guardians route, which is essentially look within and maybe pop up your head every once in a great while. I mean, when the Guardians signed Josh Bell, I was surprised. I mean, that's still one of the most surprising moves of the offseason. And signing Jose Ramirez, and I know people gave Ramirez a lot of grief for not going out for more, but look, bottom line is he was fine with it, and he wanted to stay in Cleveland. And so, at any rate, that looked out because, I mean, I know they offered deals before, but no one wanted to stay. And props to Ramirez for staying in Cleveland. He'll be forever a national hero. I mean, they'll probably build a statue out of him in Cleveland for that.
He'll be one of the. They'll put his face on one of the Guardians.
Yeah, he might be a guardian on the bridge. You might see him just sitting there, like, instead of having those feathers, he'll have his dreads, and that's what's going to happen. Like for a town that always has people leaving. I mean, LeBron left, came back, so left again because we it was almost predictable it was going to LA, but whatever.
Yeah, well, so like next year's free agency is, I don't know if you guys have looked at it, it's not very good at all. Like other than like Rafael Devers, and then maybe if Manny Machado opts out, like those are really the only two. Obviously Shohei Ohtani, but I don't think the Tigers are going to be in on those sweepstakes. So there's not much to be excited about next offseason.
Give Ohtani 15 years and $400 million. That's just do it.
Yeah, why not?
they can. It wouldn't be, but yeah. I mean, this year, this class was better. The last two classes for the shortstops were ideal, and arguably the Tigers ended up with the worst of the bunch. But there's a minute chance, I would say, that one of the teams looking for a shortstop this year may come calling for Javi Baez. Minute, I said, but it's not an impossibility because I think there are probably 3-4 teams still looking for a shortstop, like with the Cubs, the Angels, the Dodgers, the Twins, right? Like there's only one really out there that the people who don't get Swanson are going to get Elvis Andrus. I think he's the next best shortstop available. So it's possible. I don't know. I don't see it, but
as far as and if you're going to go with Elvis as your second option.
Yeah. Well, we're just getting back to Baez. Are they going to be able to actually get assets for him, or is it just going to be like a deal where they're just kind of getting off the money, or do they even have to take on some of the contract?
Yeah, I mean, it could go any which way there. Like I could see a situation where it's kind of an Ian Kinsler, Prince Fielder contract where one guy is kind of a team doesn't have space for him anymore, or they have a bad contract. I've joked before about swapping Baez for Anthony Rendon, who's making like $35 million a year, but he's been injured, but he plays third base, and then what I talked about recently is approach the Yankees and take Josh Donaldson. So he's making $25 million a year. He's considered kind of a jackass in the clubhouse, so he's not going to help team chemistry, but it's a 1-year deal. And the Yankees, I don't think, need him particularly or necessarily want him there. I mean, I suppose they could use him, but maybe you take on his full salary and get a couple low-level lottery ticket prospects, or maybe you get him for $10 million and the Yankees eat $15 million or something like that. It's a possibility. There are things that the Tigers can do like that, and I think there are things they could theoretically do with Javi Baez along those lines, where you're either taking on money or giving away some low-level prospects to get the contract off the books. It's possible. I just wouldn't call it probable.
Yeah, well, there's still teams that, like you said, need a shortstop, like the Twins, the Cubs. I've even heard Boston has been interested in Dansby, so it could be a possibility, I guess.
Boston, there was a graphic that I think Fox FS1 put out in terms of Chaim Bloom's track record, and it's not good. I mean, he is right now. Boston, a lot of Red Sox fans. I mean, you thought that people were mad at Cashman in New York. You see Mookie Betts do all this stuff in LA, they get nothing for him. Then you watch Bogarts go to San Diego, and
Yeah,
Jeter Downs, and it's just like,
he just got DFA'd. We actually had a question about him.
All right,
really?
Yeah. So we'll get to the questions here in a second, but man, I mean, Boston fans are already a feisty bunch. So let alone the fact that right now it's. But actually, you know what though? I don't feel sorry for him. Not one bit. Nah, not one bit. You know why? Because obviously of what happened many moons ago in the playoffs. But yeah, you know what? Boston fans are spoiled. They're the Patriots have won. And the Celtics have been winners.
Yeah.
When they're winners, they're sore winners. I mean, they will not. They'll like they're worse than Yankee fans at times. So, but that again, that's. I don't want to get into a big debate because I feel like sometimes some sort of Boston fan or your fan is just going to say something like, "Or you guys are Detroit." So anyway, all right. So you Chris, want to start with the questions?
Sure. Were we done with all of John's good pregame questions?
Well, I think one topic I've seen floated around, I think a lot of people are interested in, is Eduardo Rodriguez. I know we did get a question about. I think we got a couple actually. So if you guys just want to get into that.
Yeah, multiple questions about that. So, all right. Yeah, well, let's see. We got a handful of questions here. Here we go. From Detroit Tigers fan. Good name. I know there's been a lot of talk about Erod being traded. So I guess two questions. First, what do you think the likelihood is he gets traded? And secondly, if he does, what do you think would be a fair value return?
Well, I would say in terms of the odds of him being traded, I would believe the Tigers have very few untouchable players, right? So Erod can't be touched. So if that right off, I would hope Scott Harris has a price on his head, and if someone meets it, boom, make the deal. I like Eduardo Rodriguez, but I don't like him so much that I would say we're not. If we got a couple of decent looking prospects who have a bat in their hands, you make that trade. And I won't put any names to it, but if you see what Joe Jimenez brought back and believe that a starting pitcher like Erod is worth more than that, it could be a pretty satisfying deal.
Yeah, what two teams came to mind for me, and that was the Padres and the Cardinals, because the Padres lost Sean Manaea and they lost Mike Clevenger to free agency this year and haven't replaced either of them. And then the Cardinals, they could have a need in the rotation as well. So in terms of what you could get for them, I'm kind of curious, Chris, do you think they could get more for what they got for Joe Jimenez? Because it was kind of like a top 10 prospect and then kind of just like a lower level guy. Is that kind of what we'd be looking at?
By the way, the Giants signed. The Giants signed Manaea yesterday, I believe it was.
Sean Manaea, yeah,
Manaea,
yeah. I think that's a tough one because I think there's a little bit more risk with Eduardo Rodriguez than there is with Joe Jimenez. Partially, like on the bright side, you're getting a guy who is pretty damn cheap compared to the market for how good he is. We've seen, Chris Bassett got $21 million a year. Manaea got 12.5.
Ridiculous.
It's every kind of number 3 to 5 starter is getting somewhere between 13 and 25 million. So there's a good deal there, but there's always the risk is like twofold. If he comes and pitches really well, he's going to opt out. So you're only going to get him for this 1 year. If he comes in as a disaster, he may opt back in. Or may opt in, and then you've got him for the next 3 years as a disastrous pitcher. Like I think you have to trust your evaluations that he's going to be better than that. But I would think that any package for him would be somewhat similar to what they got for Jimenez. So a decent top 10 prospect from some organization, but not a top 100 style prospect. I think the Cardinals is a good suggestion there because I'm trying to think who they were. I think they were into discussions with the A's for Sean Murphy, the catcher, right?
Yeah, correct.
And then the reports came out that the A's were asking for Lars Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan and one of their Gordon Graceffa, one of their top pitching prospects. Meanwhile, the Cardinals supposedly were saying, no, take 2 of these 4 guys, and that group included Nolan Gorman and Dylan Carlson. So I don't know if you get either one of those guys for an
Uh-huh.
Eduardo Rodriguez, but this is the Cardinals. The Cardinals apparently view Donovan and Nootbaar as better than Carlson and Gorman, according to this report. So the Cardinals are very much into, they trust their own evaluations and they play guys who are going to produce. So if they think those guys might not be it, I'm sure they'd be willing to part with one of them.
Or even
maybe
somebody
not
like,
for Erod, but maybe you throw another reliever in there or something like that. Make it
or throwing a guy like Moises Gomez, something like that, who's one of their
power hitting first baseman, right?
Yeah,
it
or
outfielder?
outfielder who they got over from Tampa, who hit last year over 30 home runs and 2 stops last year in the Cardinal system. So that's a guy who also is, by the way, a right-handed bat.
Mhm.
So as far as that goes, if they want that, but it is in terms of, will Rodriguez go MIA? Look, there's some look. I think last year, some of the fans, or this year, some of the fans were like kind of giving him crap about what he was going through personally. I think it's ridiculous. Bottom line is this: I don't think he's going to go MIA again. Wasn't his MO before. He was dealing with a lot, and we don't know privately what he was dealing with. So, to me, quite frankly, back off. I mean, even you got the sense too when I talking to Hinch down in the dugout. There was a lot of times he wasn't contacting anybody, and he was going through his own thing. And again, when he was ready to come back, he was ready to come back.
I mean, real life stuff can mess up anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
But look how Tom Brady has performed this year. He's also 1,000 years old, but like having that whole divorce and being in the public eye like that, I'm sure that is not great for him. And I imagine it's hard to pitch or perform in front of thousands of people when you're worried about your personal life. It's got to be hard to turn that off. So I suppose there's always a chance that stuff crops up again, but I'd be less concerned about that than any other, normal pitching stuff like, he gets hurt or, he just doesn't perform.
And by the way, can we talk about how Oakland got fleeced? What the hell? Oakland's return was just basically saying they were just doing this to the fans. They're just going like this with the middle finger. We don't care. We're going to get this veteran catcher that no one cares about. We're going to just basically, no, it's just a giant finger to the A's fans. I'm sorry.
Well, didn't they get William Contreras?
No, the Brewers got him. Yeah. The Brewers made out better than anybody. They barely gave up anything and got William Contreras. Sean Murphy's a better all-around catcher, but they got Contreras for more years. And this is just the way the A's have operated for years, right? They did the same thing with Josh Donaldson. They did it. And what's going to happen, they got Esteury Ruiz, who's super fast and walks a lot, but might not hit the ball harder than me. And they got a veteran. They got a veteran catcher, right? And then they got 3 pitchers.
Yeah, Kyle Mueller.
Mueller. They got, and then they got Freddie Tarnock, and who is the other pitcher they got?
Robert.
Yeah, Robert Salinas.
Yes.
Those are 3 guys who have like heavy relief risk, but the A's have plenty of time to let them develop as starters in the big leagues. And what's going to happen is 1 or 2 of those guys, most likely one of them will end up popping as a starter. And in 3 years, they'll trade him for another prospect package. And one of them will be a decent reliever. One of them won't be anything. This is just how the A's, they're just in a never-ending cycle. And every now and then they get the right group together and they can make a small playoff run. But it's been, 6 years since they've done that. I can't remember the last time they were really. Maybe it's been closer than that, but it just feels like they go through more like no-name players who are suddenly decent than just about any other team. But they've been giving the middle finger to fans for 20 years now. It's not like the A's that when we were growing up, Raj, where they had all the star players. It's been Moneyball for 25 years.
Yeah.
There's even with the stadium. Well, there's no guarantees if they get the funding from the stadium, wherever they're going to go, whether they stay in Vegas or whether they stay in Oakland or not. It is, to me, embarrassing. Like, we talk about being a Tiger fan. To talk about the Tigers fans with Chris Littleton spending money. Imagine you're the A's. You have all this legacy behind you. You're one of the few teams that won 3 straight World Series, and you did it with the backbone of having a great farm system where they had Catfish Hunter, Reggie Jackson. They had all this talent, but then you think about it. When free agency got started, they got rated, and they got rated bad. And since then, it started up again in the 80s where they had like when Tony La Russa went over to Oakland and they had this great little mini dynasty for a while. They were supposed to win. They could have gone back to back, but the Reds had a say about that. So I just imagine that. Imagine you're the A's who've always been competitive, and every year they're just like, yeah, man. I don't know. It's whether it's stay or go. I don't know, but I feel bad for A's fans. I really do.
Yeah, if you guys want to stick on the baseball talk, what did you guys think of the Correa deal to the Giants?
I mean, I thought it was a great deal for both sides. I think, the 13 years, it's a kind of like shocking number when you see it, but that's just the way that the deals are going now, where guys are accepting longer deals. They want that security. And, I mean, like I said earlier, I keep bringing this up. Like, Chris Bassett is a fine major league pitcher. He's making $6 million fewer this year than Carlos Correa, which seems insane to me. Carlos Correa is an MVP level talent. He hasn't won an MVP, but he very well could. And Chris Bassett is like a solid number 4 starter. So the average annual value there, I think, is a great deal for San Francisco. And I think if Correa plays to his potential, they're gonna, he'll give him enough surplus value over the first 4 or 5 years of this deal to offset the dead part of the contract in the final 3 or 4 years. Health is always a big thing, but yeah, I thought that was smart for San Francisco, and it was a good deal for Correa.
Yeah, he got what he wanted. He wanted to be a star of a team, and he'll be the star of the team. And the Bassett deal to me just seemed like Toronto panicked because, I mean, we don't. Again, this is when I look at the fact that Toronto has been usually in the last couple off seasons very early. You always hear them mentioned as a team right away that gets things done pretty quickly. But this year they kind of, I don't know, they blinked, or maybe I don't know what happened. But I thought that deal for Bassett was an overreach. I mean, to me, it's if he was a little younger, okay, I would get it. But I don't know. Like, I don't, that kind of, when I saw the deal, I'm like, 3. Good Lord.
I kind of agree. I think you heard them mentioned with DeGrom. You heard them mentioned even with Verlander and a couple others, and they struck out there, and they must have felt they had to add a premium player. Whether Chris Bassett is a premium player is debatable, but he's a good player.
Yeah, I think right now the Yankees are probably the favorite in the division because of the Carlos Rodon signing, which I know you were a big fan of, Chris. They were able to get him for 6 years. I know he wanted that 7th year, but I believe he did get a full no trade. But that was a big signing that went down today as well.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, and I think that I mean, imagine Scott Boras right now. I mean, he literally right now has enough money where he could buy a country at this point, based off the deals he's done. What's up?
Did you see that note that somebody posted in our Discord that Boras finalized that Rodon deal to the Yankees while he was at Fenway Park eating food provided by the Red Sox as he was announcing the signing of that Japanese dude? So
nice.
What a G, man. What a Mac. It's just
Obviously, Rodon comes with some fairly significant injury risk, but I think he's in 5 years he's going to be a better pitcher than, most likely he'll be a better pitcher than Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer or whatever, because they'll be basically retired. I think he was, and probably DeGrom too. I think he was the best pitcher available. It was obviously risky, but I can't compare him before. I think to Zach Wheeler, who had tons of injuries coming up with the Mets and has been nothing but awesome with the Phillies. And everybody's different, but I think that deal's going to work out well for the Yankees, at least for a year or two. And I mean, it's another guy who's only getting $27 million, I think, a year. So he got 6 years.
Yeah.
But,
only.
well, I mean, that's just the way it's going to be, man. In 10 years, average players are going to be getting $15, $20 million for like 1 year contracts. We saw Matthew Boyd, 1 year and $10 million. Like, Lorenzen, $8.5 million. This is, all these numbers are going up. And remember, 1 year ago, the owners didn't have a whole lot of money.
Yeah,
they had to lock the players out. That pandemic really hurt them.
Oh yeah,
that was a killer.
But no, I mean, it just takes getting used to. Like I remember when Darryl Strawberry signed. I think it was a $21 million total deal, and everybody was like, "Oh my god, these salaries have gotten out of control." And
yeah. When I was watching the Nolan Ryan documentary on Netflix, which by the way, you should watch that immediately. It's really well done. He was the first $1 million man. Yep. And it was like, oh my god, he doesn't deserve $1 million for pitching every 5 days. Now, I mean, swingman relievers are getting like, look at Andrew Chafin, for example. Andrew Chafin hasn't signed yet, but he's gonna make out like a bandit. He's going to make out like a bandit.
Or the first couple deals of spring training, where like what was it, Robert Suarez, like a 5-year, $50 million deal with the Padres, and
Yeah.
That's
the dude with
amazing.
the Astros. Like, yeah, there's money. Teams are willing to spend money now, which is great. And so there will probably be ups and downs, but I think in 10 years, when Carlos Correa is 38 and making $27 million a year, there will probably be like 5 players making $50 million a year in
Sure.
baseball.
Yeah.
So
probably.
he'll be like halfway. So I don't know. I mean, it does sound wild and it is a lot of money, but it's not our money. So whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Now this kind of makes me upset now that you've explained it, because I was like, well, now the Tigers couldn't have signed him, because I was like, he's getting paid till he's 41, but when you put it like that, it's like, well, it might not be that bad.
I mean, that's
Also-
you make this point all the time. Sorry, Raj.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, just you like every team can afford any player. For the most part. I mean, there's some thought that what the Marlins owner apparently only has $500 million, so maybe he can't quite swim with Steve Cohen, but maybe he shouldn't be owning a team if he only has $500 million.
Yeah, that's right. Any team that's claiming poverty is lying. Okay, it's just a flat out lie. They can get these players. It's a choice of how they want to go after talent. You either want to swim in the deep end of the pool or you don't. But that's not about wherewithal. It's about willingness.
Yeah. And I have a question for the chat. It's like, what's your guys' favorite off-season move so far? I'm just going to ask that for the chat. If you guys want to chime in too, but.
That's a good question for the chat. Yeah, I like that. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I can think about it. We do have like a handful more questions that we can get to from Twitter or whatever.
Oh yeah. Let's go finish the questions in Twitter, and then we'll really.
All right. So Steve Cook, our buddy Steve Cook, said top free agent hitter that you wish to sign. So whoever's left that you want the Tigers to sign.
Ooh.
And then he made the comment that the development of Green and Torkelson will be key if the team can be decent. And I think everyone can agree on that, right? Like that's them taking steps forward would I think relieve a lot of Tigers fans. But top free agent hitter left.
I agree with Raj. They're not going to get Dansby Swanson, but that's obviously the guy I would go for. So Segura is kind of my second on the list because they do have an infield spot where he could probably play and a decent player. And then, of course, they don't need this player and I don't want this player, but I would like this player only because Joey Gallo, I would drive my wife insane by singing his name to the tune of Shallow. So often when he's batting, she might strangle me. So that would be fun.
Glutton for punishment?
That's funny.
What about you, John?
Oh, it's slim pickings, man. I really liked Adam Frazier because I think playing in Comerica Park with those big gaps, I could see him being a guy that could get a lot of triples there. And but obviously he signed. So I like Benintendi a lot, but I also don't really know if I want to give up on Akil Badu. Yeah, maybe a guy like Trey Mancini could play some first base and maybe play some outfield. And Dansby would be a pipe dream, obviously, but it's kind of slim pickings right now. I really don't have a guy that stands out to me. It's like, yeah, I really want him. It's kind of just like throwing darts at the wall.
What about you, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, I at this point, I think I just want one of those right-handed hitting outfielder to be in the platoon. We talked about Duvall earlier. I wouldn't mind like a Tommy Pham, who hasn't been great the last couple of years. So I think you could probably convince him to sign a one-year deal to just be a platoon guy. And he's still been good against left-handed pitching. So someone like that maybe. But yeah, it's really, as John said, yeah, there's not a whole lot out there.
Yeah, and looking the list over, I mentioned this the guy earlier. I like Profar. I still think Profar would be a good addition. And if Myers was healthy, I would go with that too. But I don't think he's going to come here. I think he wants to. There's a couple teams that he had in mind, but yeah, even despite the fact that he is a left-handed bat, regardless of that, another guy who I really like who's out there is, look, if they want to make a splash, and you're looking at what Brandon Drury, although again we talked about this earlier, is why he's kind of skeptical. Why people are skeptical about him. But bottom line is this: he can play third. He's a right-handed bat, and he, in terms of, he kind of fits Now, is he a guy who will? Does he draw a lot of walks? No, I mean to the tune of under 10%, but he strikes out at around a 20%, 23 to 25% clip. So anything under 30. So, but yeah, I mean, again, the WAR doesn't suggest he's going to be something consistent. But look, the bottom line is the Tigers. He hit 28 home runs last year. It took 2 Tigers to get to that number last year. So honestly, I think Drury would be something that I think, and Troy makes up a good point there in the YouTube chat. Green, Bias, Swanson, Drury would be a top 4. Now, Swanson I love too, but again, I think he's gonna go with the Cubs. I don't know. I mean, I feel like the Cubs are gonna come out of nowhere and just make it rain. But I mean, would it be? Look, if the Tigers signed Swanson, hypothetical, totally hypothetical. If they did sign him, if the Tigers signed him, I would name your bet. I'll do it. So if you're talking like drink, I know that there's a show on 97.1 that drinks out of a shoe. I'm not going to do that. Anything not hygienic. After that, I'm not going to do that. But if you want me to smash my face with a pie or whatever the case is, I would do it.
The old pie face.
Yeah, that's how confident I am that they're not going to sign him. But
yeah.
Well, and one other random name that I don't even hear much talked about, but when they signed Matthew Boyd, they talked about him kind of mentoring these younger pitchers and being, they believe in clubhouse chemistry and stuff. Andrew McCutchen is out there, and he is still a close to average hitter. He's not a great fielder anymore, but he's still fast. And by all accounts, he's always been a great dude, like a great team leader, former MVP. I would think that's somebody that you might want around Riley Green and Akil Baddoo and Kerry Carpenter and Parker Meadows to kind of teach them a little bit about what it means to be a professional big leaguer. And I don't think he'd cost that much. But it's a matter of does he want, in the twilight of his career, does he want to come do something like that? Or would he rather be a bench bat on a contender? But he's somebody I would contact. Just like, again, not a guy that you're counting on to be like a key piece of an offensive renaissance, but trying to build that future for your team through experience and quality veterans.
And you could even do a deal with him, like you would kind of under the table agree to cut him if some other team, if a contender wanted him.
It's a little bit like they were doing with Cameron Maven there toward the end, right? Like they brought him in, they liked him, they thought he was a great clubhouse guy, and whenever there was a chance to get him to a contender, they moved him. So,
and that's a good point that CC Gaming brings up too. He's more of a DH, so you can have him split time between Mickey and Meadows. That's actually a good point. And
yeah.
I mean,
also the Tigers are going to suck, so you can put him in the outfield.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, and JD Martinez.
Yeah, JD's out there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as a reunion goes, I can see him going to a team like a team contending. I could see him maybe going to, like, I don't know why, maybe Atlanta would be a good. Nah, not Atlanta, but I don't know, maybe I originally thought he was going to team like Seattle or something like that effect, but
the way JD studies his pitchers and the way he does have seemingly a flair for the dramatic moment, couldn't you see him being a pinch hitting nightmare for teams? To put out there as a pinch hitter. I can see him going into that role.
Yeah, I do. That's a good point on McCutchen too, because I have not heard his name at all this offseason. And looking at his numbers, like last year, like he would have been one of the Tigers' best offensive players. And I think he has value as a platoon and maybe even a guy you could trade, because he's kind of, I wouldn't say he has a renaissance, but he's been a pretty productive player in the later part of his career with Philly, and last year had a pretty solid season with Milwaukee. So I really like that idea. That was a good idea.
Yeah, it's always depending on what the player wants, what they're willing to accept. If they, All right. So the next question we got from Mark. This is our buddy Mark who sends us emails or DMs. He said, "Who are a few minor league baseball guys who could have a Parker Meadows breakout year to regain their prospect status?" And he said, also with the Boyd and Lorenzen signing, do you expect a starter to be traded before the season? We've kind of touched on that, but we haven't really thrown the gauntlet down. Do you guys expect a starter to be traded before the season?
I'm going to say yes. And to answer his question about minor league player that might break out from a bat standpoint. Chris and I were talking about this a little earlier, and I had to think about some of the guys like we talked about like I was thinking about Chris Myers, who was off to a good start before he got injured, and then he kind of derailed a little bit. Jake Holton is a guy who I think could be a case where, I mean, he's going to be 25, so he's an older prospect. But if we're talking guys like another guy who I think could continue to progress well and make a name for himself is Carlos Mendoza. I love Carlos Mendoza. I know he might not be his dad played professional baseball for the Yankees, I believe. So I think Mendoza is a guy who's gonna. He's kind of a unsung prospect because he's a guy who'll play any position, and he's a good teammate. And like him or John Vladdy still with the system, or no, he signed somewhere else.
Did he?
No, did he? I'm
not sure if he did or not. I don't know if he did or not. I don't think he's a free agent yet. I think he was kind of an older draft pick, so I think he may have been signed in the 2018 draft or 2017.
But in terms of, I don't know if he's going to be. I don't think he's a quote unquote prospect, but a guy who's unsung and who is not and gets that next level. I think a guy like him, or even if this is kind of more of a shot in the dark, but I think somebody, if the Tigers decide to put him in Lakeland, would be along the lines of like Raylan Perez, or we could see him maybe get up to Lakeland and see what he can do. But that's just like kind of like more of like in terms of making himself for Lakeland. I mean, if we're talking about like higher levels. Yeah. Corey Joyce is another one too.
Yeah, what do you guys do? You think that they'll actually trade a starter before the season?
Yeah, well, I think really the only realistic one is Eduardo Rodriguez. I'm not sure what Matt Manning's trade value would be. His body of work isn't that big yet. Turnbull's not going to bring back much until he shows something on the mound. So I think it would be Eduardo, and I think there's a good chance. I would say as high as 1-4. That he gets moved. In terms of breakout player, when I read that question about Parker Meadows, that kind of made me think somebody who had some draft status, but hadn't really shown a lot yet. So I'm wondering if Trey Cruz this year is a player that starts to justify the draft status and the bloodlines that he has. I don't know if it's there, but that would be someone who kind of qualifies as the type of player who needs to have that little bit of a surge in his production. Maybe Gage Workman too, if he could get the Ks under 30%, that might be a nice goal. Yeah. So, but you know who needs a Parker Meadows year? Parker Meadows. Can he come back and do it again? Because he's not in the majors yet. He got himself on the radar last year again, which all the credit in the world to him. It was a wonderful season. But now can he, get that cranked up again in April and keep gliding on that path? Because if he does, he's going to be in the majors. But he can't have a significant backstep either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, for me, I think they hopefully will trade Eduardo Rodriguez. I think it would be the right decision. And one player I want to ask you guys about in the minor league is Daniel Cabrera. He was a pretty high draft pick, wasn't he?
Second round pick, yeah.
Yeah.
So he was the guy I was thinking of too. But it comes to the way that he kind of phrased the question, where who's a guy who could, a former prospect who could get back on the map. And Cabrera was the one who stood out to me, because the thing about Winslow Perez and Parker Meadows, they had been good prospects and they kind of fell off the map, but they never, like with Gage Workman, there is a fatal flaw there, and it's the 40% strikeout rate. Like that's the sort of thing that it's really hard to come back from. With Meadows and Perez, they never had that like exorbitant strikeout total. They walked a decent amount. They just weren't making hard contact. They couldn't figure out a way to make solid contact regularly, and that's Daniel Cabrera's problem. And when we watch him, I don't think the swing's going to work. It didn't look great this year or last year. I'm not sure he's a big leaguer, but that's kind of what I felt about Parker Meadows before this season, right? Like, so he does strike me because he's a guy who struck out under 20% last year, and I think a walk rate close to double digits. You get that guy, you fix his swing, maybe. I think with him, it's more pitch recognition issues though, so that might be a problem. But yeah, he's the sort of guy who I could see having a transformational don't know, swing change or something like that, and getting that prospect status back. But because right now I don't think he's a big leaguer, and I think there's potential there to maybe be a fourth outfielder if something clicks. But so he was the name that stuck out to me too.
I mean, he's a guy who can crush fastballs, no problem. But if you get him anything like a lot of teams started pitching him on the inside, he would get jammed up. There was a lot of times where he got jammed on the inside part of the plate. So I think if he can hold up on the breaking ball side of things, and but I again, as of right now, is he a guy who can break out next year? Oh man, I don't know. It's a tough.
I definitely wouldn't predict it. He's the only one who fits the profile for me. I think. I mean, you could say maybe some of the younger guys like Adinso Reyes or Jose De La Cruz might, but again, those are guys with kind of strike zone issues. But it's entirely possible that something clicks for them and then they regain their prospect status too.
I mean, in terms of the guy, and somebody mentioned, and Kyle mentioned this, and so it was kind of a guy I was actually going to bring up anyways. So that's a good one. It's Roberto Campos. And Campos, look, he changed his swing last year, and he was hitting missiles, but he wasn't getting airtime yet. And I think if he can figure out the airtime, he's going to be one of the best hitters in the Tiger system because he hit. I mean, ground balls were going over 100 miles an hour. He had the most among high A last year, and he was a guy who was seeing the ball better. I mean, you look at his swing when he first got caught, when he first made rookie ball to last year. It's a step in the right direction. Keep in mind, this kid's only 19, 20, not even 20, is he?
He's 19, yeah.
He's 19 years old, and he really last year stung the ball. I mean, when I saw him down in Lakeland, that was one of my highlights of the trip because there was a couple at bats there where he had like an 8-pitch, 9-pitch at bat, and this was against the Marauders, and he ended up getting a single right up the middle. It was off that lefty, Chris, the Pirates highly that prospect we're talking about.
Solometo.
Solometo, yeah. And that guy was all arms and limbs when he was pitching anyway. But I don't know. Campos, if he can hit it up in the air, he is a guy who I think will break out and make himself more known than he did last year. I mean, last year he had a really good year. He had a really good year in terms of just if you look at his numbers. But he didn't put the home run, so it didn't make him sexy enough. And if he was hitting 20, if he hit 20 home runs last year in Lakeland, which is hard to do anyway, that would have been like, damn. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a guy that he's not ranked as highly on prospect lists publicly as I think he is on ours, but he's definitely a guy that I think could easily rocket up the list. But all right, we got a couple more questions here. Yeah, Dingler does need to step up for sure. He's another guy who seems to have kind of that flaw where it's too many strikeouts. I think he was over 30% last year. So we got a question from the Holly Jolly Orion Comet. I don't know what that means, but this was the Jeter Downs one. Do you think Jeter Downs would be a good pickup to try at third base?
You know, someone's going to take him. I mean, why not, Detroit? I mean, they certainly need talent. He's been on the prospect radar for a while. He's fallen out of favor, but you know, depends what their scouts see. Can he be fixed? I mean, can they do something with him? But I'd be happy with it.
Yeah, I guess my answer would be I would be more interested in seeing them get him than a Longoria or a Brian Anderson or a Justin Turner. So if they do end up going the free agent route, I think that would be much more interesting than just getting a veteran per se that probably you're going to have to overpay for a veteran to come here. And, you know, the ceiling for them is probably not going to be very high.
Well, no, that was interesting. Somebody posted that interesting about Jeter was down in the Puerto Rican League, the Puerto Rican Winter League, which is something that is not very highly, for whatever reason, it's not talked about enough. We always hear about Venezuela. We always hear about the Dominican. But Puerto Rico has it's the Liga de Baseball Profesional Roberto Clemente. So that's along the abbreviation. So LBPRC. So for those for you at home, listening at home.
The thing about Jeter Downs is, you know, he was a top 100 prospect once upon a time. And we actually saw him, or at least I put a video up, this may be from 2018, of him hitting a home run, I think, off Dane Myers in West Michigan. But as soon as he hit AAA, just the wheels came completely off. He hit 197, 190 in AAA, 150 in the big leagues in small sample this year. He's another one of those guys that it doesn't seem to be necessarily strikeouts. He just cannot make solid contact frequently enough. So I mean, there are some tools there, but it's a matter of like, is this swing workable at all? And I think I've heard him compared kind of to like Carter Kieboom before, where these are guys who can get it done in the minor leagues, but for whatever reason, their swing just does not work at the highest level. And if you think you can fix that, sure, go give it a try. But I would not sign him with the plans of making him your big league third baseman.
No.
So,
I was thinking more of some. He's the kind of fodder you plant at Toledo and see if something happens.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, I guess it's weird. They kind of have a logjam now at third base in the infield. The Tigers do, where if they've got Justin Henry Malloy playing at third base, and they got Colt Keith, and either Kreidler or Lipsius might be down there, and then you got Isaac Pacheco coming up behind him, and I mean they could make room for him and find at bats, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be mad if they took a flyer on him and put him in the minors, but I don't think it's necessarily the best plan.
Yeah. By the way, Jeter's Downs numbers for Ingligos Le. I'm not going to try it. Sorry. I know I speak the language, but good Lord, I'm sick and I'm just I can't do it. Right now, he's put up a slash line of 146, 263, and 188 in 57 plate appearances with no home runs and 5 RBIs. By the way, the Richie Palacios, who that's the Tigers. That's the guy. The
Tigers got Jermaine Palacios.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got There's 2 different ones on this team, so I got mixed up for a moment. But yeah, and in terms of Trey Cruz, that was when I saw the Trey Cruz thing. I don't want to say it surprised me, but he has put up a slash line at 271, 360, and 346 for the Leones Le Ponce. But they're sitting at 16 and 17 on the year, so that is interesting because remember, Chris, we were in Erie, the kind of soured on some of the teammates for.
Yeah, there was a lot of laissez-faire defense from Trey Cruz, and it did not go over well with the team in the playoff hunt. I mean, like I said, I don't know what's going on with Jeter Downs. It's entirely possible that he's down there trying out a brand new swing to try to fix whatever's going on, and sometimes that results in absolute disaster. I think JD Martinez had a bad spring training with the Astros before they cut him when he was doing his, working on his new swing. Not to say that anything like that's happening. I'm just saying we don't really know, or at least I don't really know what's going on with Jeter Downs. I would hope the Tigers do, but yeah, I don't know. If, like I said, if they add him and put him in the minors, fine. If it doesn't work out, there's no real harm there.
Another guy who's having a really good year, by the way, is down in Puerto Rico is Henny Heverchia, who was the utility guy for
Echeverria, the old Cuban shortstop.
Yeah.
Another wizard with the glove.
Yeah, his nickname is, by the way, La Pantera.
The Panther?
La Pantera.
60% of the time, it works every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
he was the Marlin, right? Former Marlin shortstop.
Yeah, former Marlin. He was also a Brave, too. And I think with the Cubs, I believe.
Yeah, and so I remember him with Blue Jays, maybe? I think he was involved in that massive, Troy Tulowitzki, Mark Burley deal back in the day. Maybe even, who was it? Jose Reyes was involved in that, too, I think. So a couple more questions, quick ones. Brad Grawl said, how do you guys feel about them potentially trading for a Danny Jansen, Travis d'Arnaud, or even a Gabby Moreno? So trading for a catcher. I think we've discussed this in previous shows.
Yeah, I think they're going to stick with Haas and Rogers. I mean,
the Tigers have been promoting Rogers. They promoted Rogers on their Twitter feed today.
Yeah.
Well, I think obviously if you could get Gabriel Moreno, then you tell Eric Haas to go play in Siberia. I mean, right? I mean, you take the talented guy, but I think the Blue Jays are going to just look to move Jansen. I would think they're going to keep the guy they think has a pretty high ceiling in Moreno, who, the only question with him is that does he hit too much to play catcher, and they got to move him somewhere else so to keep his batting lineup.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if they go get a good catcher, but it always depends on what they give up, and Travis d'Arnaud doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. He's once upon a time he was a great prospect, and he's had a solid career, but it seems like he's always injured. So I don't necessarily think that helps much. But yeah, Gavin Moreno for sure. If they can get him for whatever, then go for it.
I know the price would be high, but I've read a couple of places that they would move him, which is interesting. Because Alejandro Kirk is a fine player and he had a nice year, but Danny Jansen's always hurt. I mean, he's got some power though, but he might be the guy they like working with the pitching staff. I don't know that, but yeah, if they could make a move on Moreno, it would cost something substantial, but it would be a pretty interesting move.
Yeah, and we've seen in years past there have been some kind of like no doubt top 20 prospect style catchers who end up not working at all.
Sure.
I'm blanking on the guy's name, the switch hitter from Cleveland who ended up in San Diego.
Francis
Mejia. Mejia, and there was also Austin Hedges has ended up being a great defensive catcher, but he never did much with the bat. So it's entirely possible that they want to move Moreno before he gets exposed. But I still think they would want an awful lot for him. So, but yeah, if they can go get him for something, sure. Someone named Cameron, our buddy,
who
asked if Michael Lorenzen is a depth signing or a quote, we expect to move Erod signing.
I say 100% depth. I think if the Tigers can get something out of him, whether it's a swingman role or he becomes the next closer, I really look. I don't care if he can be effective pitcher. That's all that matters to me. So, I that's what I think. Depending on how you can trust you can trust the Feder process. In other words, with that. So,
I agree. I think it's kind of the best of both worlds. Like it's depth that they want more major league innings, but also he's versatile enough that he can move back and forth from the rotation to the bullpen if needed. So I would think that that's the next question, basically, in our final question from Deadly Ninja Bees. He said, if Eduardo Rodriguez and Soto are moved, is it better to make a trade now or wait until the deadline?
I think for Soto, you probably wait because he didn't have the best season last year, and if he can,
no, I'm sorry, I disagree with that.
Well, okay, I'm not saying he had a bad season, but if he could kind of fix his command and improve on that, then you would think his trade value would probably be a little bit better. So I would say you'd probably wait for him to the trade deadline.
By the way, 2 former Toledo Mud Hens were signed this evening. Drew Carlton was on the 40-man roster, was signed by the Padres as a minor league deal, and former Mud Hen Jamie Westbrook was signed by the Yankees. So I want to pass that along real quick. So, but
okay, Raj, tell us why you disagree.
Yeah.
About Soto, it's simple. Again, he was good when he needed to be in the closer role. Were his walks high? Yes, absolutely. He sucked with. I mean, sorry, I cleaned it up. Sound more professional. Yes, he did have command issues, no doubt. But I don't know what else the guy needed. Again, every time I hear fans complain about him, I just go, "Did you not remember Todd Jones? Did you not?" It was again the Tiger close. I don't know what the expectation of Tiger closers are in this town, but everyone always bitches about it. It's frustrating. Soto has again. Take the All-Star. We're using people are gonna say, "Well, he was an All-Star," and then they'll dismiss that as well. We had to have somebody go to the All-Star game.
Yeah.
Hey, the reason why is because he's good. No, but he's good.
He is good.
He's good. Yes.
Okay. Would he have been an All-Star if every team didn't deserve or had to have an All-Star? Would he have been an All-Star last year?
Yeah. No. He's a left-hander who can throw 100 miles an hour. What else do you want?
Yeah, but to John's point, like his strikeout rate has dropped each of the last 2 seasons. Like he's shown us more than he's capable of more than he did last year, and I think it's not out of the question that he could be better this year and get you more at the deadline than he would right now. Yeah. I think that's kind of a gamble you take because you have him under team control for 3 years.
Yes,
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We saw the Tigers traded Joe Jimenez, and so teams may be looking for relievers right now. I just feel like you'd probably get a better return for Eduardo Rodriguez right now than for Gregory Soto, or teams would be more willing to part with something a little bit closer to the big leagues and a little closer to an average player. That you might get a couple low level, high upside guys for Soto, but there's a little too much volatility there, and so I do think the Tigers are probably better off just holding on for a couple months and get him out there. Maybe he goes 25 for 25 and save opportunities by the All-Star break, and he's got like a 2 ERA, and you go, all right, now's the time to move him.
Yeah,
By the way,
I don't think there's a huge risk. I mean, more than any of any other pitcher getting hurt.
By the way, his FIP last year was a 3.59, which was lower the year before, 4.14. That's all. That's all.
Yeah,
I'm not so going to hang my hat on that. So
Well,
his walk rate was lower last year, which people I don't think realize. He actually
lowered his walk rate from 5.7.
Lowered his walk rate, yeah. But the strikeout rate came down too, which is mild concern. But
also he allowed 7 home runs over 63 innings in 2021. You know how many home runs he allowed last year in 60 innings? 2.
And I think one of them was in like his first outing or the first week. I remember it was like, oh man, was it the first game?
I think it was the first
I'm
game.
Trying to remember because
I'm looking at it right now. I'm looking it up right now. Yeah, he allowed a. Let's see here.
No, I was wrong. Wait, no. What am I looking at? I'm looking at the wrong thing.
Was it against the White Sox?
I thought,
it was a
home run on opening day.
Yeah, you're right.
And then one more.
And Connor brings up a good point too, by the way, and he's absolutely right. So let's see here. When was the next time he gave up a home run?
In August against the Rangers.
Yeah. Oh. I'm sorry. If that's not good, I don't know what is. But and Connor makes a good point. Very rarely do you get a good closer for more than 2 to 5 years historically.
Okay. So Raj, what you're saying is you think his trade value is the highest right now. You don't think his trade value could ever be higher than it is right
if
now.
he goes, I'm thinking if they're going to hold on to him till the All-Star break and continues to do what he's doing, his trade value will be even higher. I thought that I was trying to knock the notion he wasn't good.
No, I'm not saying he wasn't good. I'm saying he could get better.
I mean, he can get better if he cuts down his walks and gets that K per 9 back up to over 10.
He finds his slider again. That was the main thing last year. Yeah.
There you go. Does he find the slider? Does he get that back and make it a weapon? Because he basically ignored it last year. He was a one-pitch guy.
Go ahead, Hubert. I'm sorry.
Well, I just think that, I will say this. Joe Jimenez brought back way more than I thought. Okay, that hitter looks better than I thought they would get for Joe. So that's an argument for, hey, see what Soto can get now. But I just do think that come July, come the trade deadline, when the contenders across the board are going to be looking to add bullpen depth, whether it's a closer or not, if he has fixed his slider and if he's having a good season, that trade value should be there for him if he's looking that good.
Yeah, I think he was good last year, but I think there's a lot of improvement to be made. There's a lot left to be desired. I mean, he's walking 5 batters per 9 innings. Like,
yeah, I understand that. I understand he could be better, but again, I don't know the narrative that he wasn't. There's a narrative out there that says he's a crappy closer, and I disagree with that. I mean, if you're going out there, historically speaking, you're closing 90, you're doing something that no Tiger pitcher has ever done, but apparently doesn't mean shit to people.
But he is pitching in garbage time for.
Oh, come on, man. Come on, John. You can't have it. No. You can't have it both ways then. You can't.
I'm just saying.
Garbage time.
There's a difference between closing on a contending team and baseball games that actually matter.
It doesn't matter, though. It doesn't matter. He got saves. What else do you want? I mean, he can't pick his competition. That's ridiculous. Look, if he was on a better team, maybe a team would figure out his grip on his slider. But come on. Look, the Tigers, is it his fault the Tigers couldn't hit? No.
No, I don't know. No, go ahead, Chris.
Well, our buddy Mark Gorosh likes to compare him to Jose Alvarado, the lefty who was pitching for the Phillies this year. And they're similar. I mean, they throw really hard. Alvarado basically walked his way out of Tampa, I believe, when he was younger. He just couldn't throw strikes anymore, and they ended up. But his was he was like 7-8 walks per 9. Like it was bad. Mm-hmm. Jairo Labor bad. But they didn't get much for him, but he's turned it around with Philly, and it looks like a very valuable reliever. And I think if they were to trade him, they'd get something really good for him. So I think there's there's a future for Soto to become something like that. He's still, what is he, 28?
Yeah.
Like he might not even be that old, but yeah, like I don't think there's any rush to trade him just because I think there's still more ceiling there. Whereas, and it's entirely possible that Erod could go out and have a great first half and raise his value. But I would just think any team that doesn't get that mid-rotation starter that they want this offseason might come sniffing around and saying, hey, we'd like to get 30 plus starts from this dude rather than 10.
It kind of brings up a good point about, and Carter's right. There's a great article by Cody Saberhagen about Robin Lung, who is the assistant pitching coach, the guy from Iowa. One of the things and I remember when we were at West Michigan, this is a few years ago when Soto was at West Michigan, one of the things he talked about with me when he was a starter, was getting consistency from his slider. His slider grip has always been an issue for him. So this is before he even changed his windup. 2 years ago, as you recall, when it was down in the winter leagues, they had him kick that high kick down or high leg kick down to simplify it. So he is, and Connor's absolutely right. He's opening up too much, and that when you can't get a grip on your slider like that, it can dance all over the place. I mean, we saw pitches that were just like just go over back to the backstop, even to the dugout at some point. So
hit the mascot.
Yeah, almost hit pretty much the Bull Durham style. There is a lot there to be said that I think that this is a guy who used to be a starter in the minors. Can throw. I mean, he also had at one point he had a decent changeup too. That was what I remember him for. Was that he had a pretty good changeup too? Remember that, Chris? I mean,
remember we asked him about it. And he said he was working on it. I think it was kind of like a fork ball changeup, right? Or maybe like a Vulcan change.
Yeah,
and I think he has thrown it a handful of times in the big leagues. But I mean, really, his fastball is sinker is pretty damn unhittable.
Yeah,
if he throws enough quality strikes with it, and if he just had that slider just to keep people off balance, right? Enough where he can land it and not tip it. That would be enough, I think, for him to continue to excel. But yeah, I mean, 30 save season, he's a quality closer. I just think there's a little bit more in the tank there. Even if there's not, if he pitches the exact same level he did last year, I think you're probably going to get the same amount for him at the deadline than you would right now. The only worry is if he regresses or gets hurt.
Yep.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Before we got out of here, I know I'm very adamant about sticking up for him, and I know that I'm as a reporter, I shouldn't be. I'm supposed to be objective, and I am objective. I like to think I am, but like I said, the numbers about Soto to me don't lie. This is a guy who, on the sinker and his fastball, hitters were hitting 237, 195 against his four-seamer. It's where his slider comes into play, 262, and that's where a lot of people did the damage against, and that to me is telling. So if he can get that slider under control, give him another year like that, or yeah. So again, just the numbers. If I was not going by the numbers, I wouldn't say otherwise. So was that it on questions, Chris?
Yep, that was all the questions, and I see this. Here's another transaction. The Yankees have signed Zach Houston to a minor league contract. Former Tigers reliever Zach Houston. So that just came over here. That's fun.
Those relievers can hang on forever.
Yeah, I feel like Zach Houston was in the system for a long time too.
Here's another fun one that I doubt this happened like this, but 9 minutes ago, the Brewers have signed right-handed pitcher Adonis Medina to a minor league contract. 8 minutes ago, the Brewers have released Adonis Medina. I don't think it happened that way, but it would be kind of funny if it did. So yeah, I a lot of good questions. Longer podcast than I expected, but this is how we do it, man. If the Tigers do anything, we could stretch it into a 2-hour show.
Apologies for blowing my nose on Mike earlier. That's a very podcast podcast violation. So I apologize about that. But yeah, we're out of here. Thank you so much for listening. And if any breaking news happens in the next couple of days, we'll definitely do a mini emergency pod. But for now,
it'll only be an hour and 20 minutes.
No, or maybe we'll hit that 45-minute mark, that sweet 45-minute mark. That I'm surprised I'm still up. I'll be honest with you, with the way my head is feeling right now. I'm a hat hammer. So, but thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. We'll be back next week, probably more likely the final show of the year, because I think in the I think with a couple weeks off in December to end the year will be appropriate. But we are going to check out all the great content over at woodwardsports.com. There'll be some more Tiger content coming out, and then go to tigermlreport.com. We'll be having some profiles there. Troy, thank you for the comment. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the chat tonight.
Thanks,
Connor, by the way, I don't know who you are. I know you're new, but you're welcome to stay in around anytime. I really like your Connor. If we had a commentary guy tonight or like MVP, I would put him and, of course, CC Gaming for the contributions. Everybody, no, everybody's.
I don't play favorites, so I think they're all great.
Look, I'm not playing favorite either, but Connor, Connor's a new guy in here, and when I saw that, it's like, well, man, he's talking some release points, talking some stuff that we have talked about before, so it was good to see. I don't know, like anybody new I want to recognize for coming in here.
Sure, it's nice.
He's the rookie of the week.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, but everybody else in here is awesome, of course. And so we'll see you next week. Have a good week, everybody. And again, if the Tigers happen to have a miracle of Swanson, here's what will happen. If they sign Swanson, Chris, John, Uper can't do it, but if he wanted to mail like a spring-loaded pie and put it in a box and put it in my face, although it might be what's up?
We should probably be some sort of like Swanson frozen dinner that gets
like Salisbury steak. I got to eat frozen.
Just smack you in the face with the Salisbury steak, like
there we go.
Napoleon Dynamite style.
Yeah,
the steak to the face.
All right, yeah, that would be that. Yeah, well, yeah, Salisbury steak. There we go, or Swanson frozen meal. Yeah, that's the way to go about it. So until then, guys, have a good week, everybody.
Yeah.